Separation from the Canada Club, visual approach, runway 4 right.
Clear visual 4 right, maintain visual separation.
Combat 504, we speed 170 for tower space. You get follow Boeing 727, 1 o'clock, 6 miles right stage, descending out 3,500. We got hit inside with 170 on the 504. Combat 504, follow traffic, clear visual approach, runway 4 right, maintain 170 on 504.
Hey, everybody. Welcome back to another great episode of the Autopilot On Podcast. I'm Scott. John's here with us, and we have a great guest today. We have Kora, the Aviation Therapist. Welcome, Kora.
What's going on, Kara?
Good. Hi. Thanks for having me. Hello from the Pacific Northwest.
How's it?
Awesome.
Sunny
I'm
out
here
there
in
finally?
DC today.
It's actually 60, cloudy, and rainy, believe it or not.
Boy,
It's already turning into fall for you guys, huh?
Yeah. I'm wearing pants right now. Was wearing a sweater earlier. It's really nice right now.
You
Man.
know what's interesting? In Atlanta, it was 65 degrees and rainy for the last 3 days in August, and everyone here was like, "Oh, it's already fall" or whatever. It was like the coldest I've ever seen. Everyone was in sweaters and stuff. It was super weird.
that is
So
weird.
the sun just
Burning.
came out. The sun just came out right now, so everyone's in better spirits. But I mean, it's like 80 degrees. So
I thought you were in DC though. Come on.
well,
Don't confuse
technically.
us like that.
Thought this would be a fitting wallpaper for I thought this would be a fitting wallpaper for our conversation today in DC and just the FAA and the medical exemption process that everyone has to go through with AMEs and all that. So yeah, hopefully it doesn't ruffle any feathers.
Yo,
Maybe it is. I don't know. But anyways, it's really good to have you. I don't know, Scott, where do you want to begin with her? There's so much
Well-
things to unpack.
yeah, let's start. Kora, why don't you give us your story of how you got into mental health and then how you ended up deciding to work with pilots in that process?
For sure. They are kind of connected. So I've been in the mental health field coming up on 10 years. I'm Peruvian. And when I first started, looking around for what to do with my life for the next 50 years, really looking at what communities needed to be served or were generally overlooked. So I'm Peruvian, and I started out doing therapy in forensics for folks that spoke Spanish in the criminal justice system, that were navigating that, whether it be court ordered or they just need support for it. And that is my friendly orange cat. His name is Lucky. You might see him walk around here. It's his world. I just pay rent in it. So yeah, so accessibility was my number one thing. I really saw a huge gap in that community out here in Oregon. When I first started, there were maybe under 5 Spanish-speaking forensic providers in the whole state. I had a really good mentor. Then when COVID hit, I saw that pilots were getting really affected, especially before the CARE Act was established. My partner is a pilot for one of the big 3 at the time. He was working for Compass, RIP Compass.
Rip Compass.
Yeah, RIP Compass.
Yeah.
I even have a Compass mug. So yeah, so he lost his job, and I know a lot of other folks in aviation were kind of facing the same thing. And when I looked into the resources that y'all had, I realized there were not very many of them. And as a lot of people were, finding mental health resources during the pandemic, pilots didn't have that. So it ultimately became an accessibility issue again. There's no one providing this. Originally, the first thing that came to my mind was, confessions at churches, and the FAA had even in the past come out and said, go to your clergyman or church support staff. And so that's kind of where it started, which then has pivoted now to mental health counseling that's safe for pilots. Also similar through a loophole in that we call it life coaching. So a lot of pilots come and they, are smart and they want to report to the things that they're doing to their AME because it's like a crime if you, it's literally a crime if you don't, and not wanting to be incarcerated like my former clients. They decide
Ouch.
to not lie. So life coaching is a really good way to give access to folks. Same services. We just focus less on diagnosing because we don't go through insurance. That also allows pilots and any aviation professional to, one, have more control over their care because we're not trying to get approved through a third party. And then also they don't need to worry about any kind of diagnosis because that's just not part of our standard here. if someone is curious about getting diagnosed, we absolutely do that, but it's not what we're trying to get done in the first hour to prove to insurance that it's necessary, which then leads to, because it's life coaching, it's not a medical professional visit for the Med Express form. So that can kind of put pilots at ease. And then kind of an unsuspecting benefit is that a lot of pilots had tried to go get counseling in their local communities, but unfortunately their therapist can't, practice outside of, their jurisdiction or their state line. So I got a bunch of pilots that were like, the only time I have away from my 3 kids under the age of 5 is on an overnight, and my therapist can't see me there. So, yeah, again, accessibility. I'm really fortunate. We have folks all over the world, and navigating time zones is a thing. But yeah, it seems to be working pretty well. So that was kind of my story. My partner, his conclusion is that he's at his dream airline. He's working at one of the big 3. So there,
Congrats to him.
he did, he did, find his way. Just wanted to add closure to that part. So that's my story, and I just, working with y'all, I know how much time, energy, effort, dare I say, tears go into your career, and to be afraid of losing that for accessing basic health care just didn't sit right with me.
Yeah, I totally agree. I got a question to start it off as you kind of told your story. And I think I never really thought about it until getting into aviation. When we go to a regular doctor, like a psychologist in this example, do they try to find a diagnosis so they can go and bill it to insurance for whatever they're trying to do? Like, I don't have any context. I don't know if you do, but what's their strategy involved? I'm not saying it's a malicious strategy, but most people don't have to worry about a diagnosis in that sense. And I'm just kind of curious on what the medical field is trying to do as you go in and say, hey, I have this issue. What do I do? Do they just say, hey, we need to give them drugs to solve the issue that way? And then try yeah.
No, so I can only speak to my scope, which is mental health. Anything that happens below here, I'm like, Hail Mary, I don't know, I don't know. But for therapists or any kind of mental health professional, you need to establish for your insurance company, and this is where I'm like, maybe malicious on the insurance company's part. But you need to establish that. I know, right? That's like a whole nother episode. You need to establish that you are worth the care that they are covering. And so for practitioners, it's really hard because insurances usually demand that within the first hour of meeting someone.
That's insane.
So even
can we just take a second for a sec?
You
they
want to go
need
down
to
that
diagnose
path?
you with an issue.
All right.
Yeah, we can do
Here
that.
we
Well,
go.
I'm just saying,
So I spent a decade
insane.
working in medicine before I got into aviation. In my last 2 years, I was managing an urgent care. So I was the one dealing with insurance. And so that was in 12 to 14. So pre and post Obamacare, Affordable Health Care Act.
Yeah.
That changed the game. Pre-Affordable Health Care Act, it was patient care first, and then you worried about billing. And then Affordable Health Care Act, what it did was it required what Cora's talking about, which is you first visit, you have to put a diagnosis in or you will not be reimbursed. And it ruined medicine as a treatment device because now it's all about money and insurance. It's not about patient care anymore. And that's the reason I ultimately got out. I burnt out on dealing with, it's not what people signed up for, right? You sign up to help people. And so that's the problem, John, that's why every time you go into a doctor, they're asking you the same exact questions every single time because all they're built to do is check that insurance box, check that diagnosis box. Can I click in my EMR this diagnosis because it pays more than that diagnosis? That's all the questions are designed for. It's not about getting you to your best health anymore. It's sad, but that's the reality. And that's why concierge medicine becomes so popular because concierge medicine
online and stuff like that.
No, so concierge medicine, what it is doctors are getting off the insurance systems now. They're just done with it because it's ruined their practice. So what they'll do is these docs, they're usually family docs or somebody with a specialized care, and they will just say, okay, you know what? I don't want to deal with insurance anymore because with insurance, you have to bill out double the money to get less than half of what you've billed to get your normal amount. So these guys go, well, I can charge 40% cash to be on my service. and I can limit my client list to this couple hundred people for the year, and I'm making more money and no hassles or headaches. And so these guys will build these practices where it's like you and a couple hundred people, you pay a few $1,000s a year, whatever it is, to be on their service. They're available to you usually 24/7. You get their cell phone number. If they're on a vacation, they have another provider who fills in for them. You can call over the phone and get your, if you just need prescription refills or basic video chats, you can go in the office. Some of them even make house calls. And it's
Some of them have nurse lines too that you can talk to. Yeah.
exactly. Yeah, it's incredible. So a lot of people are starting to go down that road because then you actually get a doctor who cares about you, who knows you. There's nothing more frustrating than you go to this medical doctor, you make him your primary doctor, and then you go in 6 months later after to see him, and he knows nothing about you. He didn't even take a minute to review your chart. He walks in, "Oh, what's going on?" And you're like, "Well, I'm dealing with this." "Oh, have you had it before?" "Oh, you clearly didn't review my chart." It's becoming so frustrating. But
Right.
I'll back off my soapbox off on that. So you want to go down that rabbit
I
hole?
I rant and rage about boomers. He goes about healthcare. So that's funny. Cora, what do you think about everything about all that
I
stuff that
mean,
we're saying?
it's almost like Scott knew. I mean, that's kind of my model was I literally cut what we were charging with insurance literally in half. And because it is, and I don't know if you've run into the issue, is also sometimes insurance takes a really long time. So either the clinician has to eat the cost or the client just has to be in limbo until
Mhm.
the administrators, decide to do something. And so, yeah, I'm really glad as a provider, even, taking pilots out of it, it just never felt super ethical to go in that model. So, yeah, I do the same thing. There's no diagnoses. With that said, in my clinic or, consulting, I call it the flight deck, the folks
Cool.
in my little flight
Nice.
deck. Yeah.
Clever.
Thank you. We do have someone that does specialize in diagnosing. So he's like a mental health assessor and has been doing it for several years. So obviously we have that resource if someone wants to explore that. But it's never like the first thing we're trying to do before I even get to know you. Or, you know,
That's
so
awesome. Like,
yeah.
honestly, hearing that compared to what Scott just described, there needs to be more of that in our industry and in the world, to be honest with you, because I don't know, maybe it's just me looking at a corrupt system in that sense and gotten way too big, but it makes me really happy to know that there are resources out there that you can go to and just talk and not have to worry about your livelihood being threatened in that sense.
Yeah.
And I guess one thing I wanted to ask you was, is there a lot of people that come to you when it comes to mental health? Is it mostly people that go through like a traumatic event and they're like, "Hey, I need to get help in this sense, but I can't go through, the standard civilian way, I guess you could say it."
Yeah. Yeah.
Versus for us having to go kind of not incognito, but like going this other course where,
Yeah.
or is it mostly people that say, "Hey, I try to go to you weekly," in that sense where nothing's bad going on right now, but it's something I try to maintain consistency in?
Yeah, so I'd say it's a little bit of both. Probably the majority, something just push someone beyond their like comfortable stress level. And so my modality is I really focus on like honoring the things that you're coming into, the sessions with, such as fears or, whatever. But then giving you tools to like navigate them. So in general, like I said, I have someone who's diagnosing. I have someone who works really well with crises. Those are not as frequent. I've never like published myself as a crisis line. There are some really good organizations specifically for aviation professionals, but you bring up a really good point in that sometimes I have someone and they're like, I just went through something super, traumatizing, severe. And at the start, they might need 2 sessions a week. I had a girlie get married and she had, I think, 3 or 4 sessions leading up to her wedding day. And, it turned out to be great and all that stuff. But that's another bonus of not going through insurance is that, like, yeah, until we can get you stable, like, yeah, let's meet every few days. Maybe it is twice a week or maybe it's weekly. But it's ultimately like client led. It's not some like ghost person of insurance. And so, yeah, sometimes it's that. Sometimes it's just people coming in for a tune-up or, like any kind of wellness check that they might get for their liver or kidneys or gut health. There's that. And then I also a lot of young families navigating the aviation life. And I do have someone who works with young families, who has an education and background in early childhood and family education. So yeah, it's definitely there's no stereotype client is what I've learned in this industry.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
That's so interesting. I
What
think one thing for
oh, go
me
ahead.
that I wish I had. Go ahead, Scott.
Before we get off of it, you said that there's like crisis hotlines for aviation specifically. What can you give those a plug? I haven't heard of these. This would be great
Yeah.
for people.
Yeah, of course. The first one that comes to mind is Therapy. It's like th.air and then a P. It's run by crew, for crew. It started out for flight attendants and is kind of mostly focused on that, but it's literally to any aviation professional in the industry, and it is more of a peer-to-peer thing, but it is more of that instant, like, I need this now to get me through. I know ALPA has some good peer-to-peer support as well. Obviously, that's specifically for like airline pilots, but huge shout out to Therapy. It's run by an amazing person, cannot speak like the right person to like do this thing. And like I said, she's crew, it's for crew by crew, and it's no questions asked. Like they're not like, what's your ID number? They're yeah, or like, what part of the plane are you
Could you
above wing or
imagine?
below wing? Yeah. So none of that stuff. It's very welcoming, and yeah, the person who founded it is phenomenal. There it is. Yeah.
Okay. I want to give them a free shout out there. There you go. Yeah.
Yeah.
For people listening, it's spelled TH-AIR like air and then APY. So
Yeah.
that's where
And
you can find them.
the
It's a pretty
website's
cool website.
is GETTHAIRAPY.org. Gettherapy.org. So shout out for those guys. But
And you'll
sorry,
get
John.
connected to a peer phone or WhatsApp. So yeah.
No, it's great. I was going to ask another question about when it comes to this kind of services offered to pilots, is this becoming more and more prevalent nowadays, or was it kind of off the radar? And when did this start becoming a thing, I guess? Or is it really not, and you're just kind of being the first kind of to do it?
I don't know, and that's kind of hard running and being a part of an underground industry is,
Yeah.
that fine line of wanting to be known enough for people to find you, but also not wanting to like out yourself. Like 3 years ago, I had to do an internship as part of my master's degree, and I did find one aviation therapist, I think in like Wisconsin or like the lower East Coast, and I reached out and he never responded. So there was one person 3 years
Ghosted.
ago. Hope he's doing well. Yeah. Yep. He was not interested in being my mentor.
Well,
But in
his loss.
general, yeah, his loss. But in general, I think some airlines, like I know Delta has been working with, I think the company's called Emerald Coast. Don't quote me on that. So we are seeing those rolling out in the last 6 months to a year, depending on the company. What I've seen is there's still a very strong distrust. And I can't speak for Emerald Coast or any of those places, but assuming they are the more traditional counseling role, that does kind of push people back into that corner of needing a diagnosis, regardless of how friendly or trauma informed the therapist is. If they are using insurance, it kind of negates the pilot friendliness of it. So if we have anyone at Delta or any of the other airlines that are associated or have pilot friendly mental health care, let me know if they require diagnosis. I'm very curious.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah, that'd be good. Good to find out.
There is a general hesitation, believe it or not, from pilots to go talk about their troubles to someone associated with their company.
Yeah.
Totally.
Well, I mean, let's talk about it. The stigmas involved with it. I mean, other than the fact that you could lose your medical, what are the other things?
I think there's a lot of extremism in what people think, a mentally ill pilot means. The things we see in the media, like Captain Emerson, those are very extreme cases. And as someone that kind of deals with the more like beats on the street, everyday kind of stuff, those are really rare and far between. A lot of them are just like, hey, I was a CFI, now I'm flying corporate, or I'm at the airlines, my schedule's different. How do I connect with my partner now? Or I am now a father or a mother to really young kids. How do I balance that? And I'm not going to come back and say, well, just eat dinner with your family every day. Or like, so understanding the scope and the like obstacles that are part of the pilot life is really helpful to like offer tools. But yeah, in general, it's pretty run of the mill stuff. I'd say about a third of it is actually performance related, like in the flight deck, how can I be a better pilot? But yeah, it's the normal, like, my teenager just did something asinine, or how do I get my 2-year-old to stop eating everything? Stuff like that. Folks that can go through.
I think it's really interesting how the FAA has this kind of stance on mental health when we probably have one of the most, I'm not going to say depressing jobs, but it can be a very lonely job. If you
Yeah.
don't have connections and everything, most people, like regional airline stuff, they're gone 18 days a month. That's alone in random places around the country at the end of the night. If they don't have anyone to talk to at home, or maybe there's tough things going on at home, and it's a really challenging job. And the fact that, again, I'm not trying to ruffle any feathers, but I think it really pisses me off
Ruffle
how
the
we
feathers.
have
Ruffle
the
them.
FAA go to us and say, nope, if you go to here, then it's going to be on your record and your company can see it. We're going to see it, and we're going to decline you your way to earn money. Like, what the hell? How is that like?
Well, then they
I
expect
don't know.
people to
It
self-report.
doesn't make any sense.
Yeah.
Yeah, it doesn't make any sense in how they're doing this, and I have no idea how I'm not trying to blame anyone else for this, but past generations have just been like, "Well, I guess we're just not gonna seek help, and we're not gonna do anything." It's like, that's how suicide happens, that's how divorce happens, that's how all these bad things in life happen when you don't have an outlet to these issues in your life, and you're gone 18 days alone. Like, what do you expect to happen in Oklahoma City? What do you expect to happen? So,
Yeah.
anyways, I'm frustrated,
No.
sorry.
Yeah, no, and especially you bring up a really good point, is up until, the last decade, regionals were getting also paid. And so like that historical
Yeah.
context, and I at my own company, we offer a sliding scale. So if you're listening and you're considering counseling, that's something to ask anywhere you go, is do you offer a sliding scale, especially if you're paying out of pocket. So yeah, ours is
Making it
$40
accessible.
and accessible. Yeah, 40 bucks, no paperwork or anything. And so yeah, if you're in the market, ask your doctor, ask your therapist, especially if you're paying out of pocket.
I think
That's
so
for
many
sure.
people appreciate what you're doing. I know I'm not alone in this. Obviously, you hear about everyone going to your clinic and doing all of that. Like, it is the Lord's work, if you want to put it that way.
Fish posh, thank you, I love it. I haven't had a bad day at work since. It's honestly my dream job. And so if you are my client listening, just know I love my job, and hopefully that brings some comfort.
That's amazing.
I mean, I'll just keep the train going.
Yeah, whatever you
Is,
want.
kind of that stigma of, from the general population, but then also I think the FAA needs to recognize that, if someone is going through a crisis, like therapists, much like pilots, have to get licenses and
Mhm.
have to get 2,000 hours, or 1,500, and have mentors and stuff. And so, trusting us as therapists, as other professionals in the field outside of pilots, I think that's something that also doesn't get talked about enough in the mental health reform. Is, yes, you have your pilots who have a lot to lose, but then it's also like therapists also have to go through years of training. And I'll be the first to say I've had to tell some pilots, like, hey, maybe let's like not touch an airplane for just a little bit,
Yeah.
let's like put pause on that. And up up to now, and this is 5 years in, I've never had a pilot be like, screw you, Kora, I'm going to do what I want and I'm going to get back in my plane. So yeah, that is just an aside of one. It's usually not, crazy. We're going to relive German wings again. But then, if it does, like the FAA also has to trust us as licensed, certified professionals that have to have, a master's level and then get also like 2,000 to 5,000 hours, depending on your state and what type of certification you hold.
Why do you think the FAA made this stance? When do you think it was created that way? And why do you think their inability to change their perspective on this is so black and white?
I think it changed after a few incidents. German wings was one of the more recent ones. There was also, I believe, a Japanese carrier who I think the captain did an honor killing because it was on an anniversary of his time during the war, where all his 9 out of 10 of the people other than him, died. So that was one. And then there was another one that happened around the same time, similar. And then finally, that FedEx that didn't get as much attention. It was FedEx or UPS that smuggled like an axe in a guitar case, and thankfully there was crew that was able to subdue him, and he wasn't able to crash the plane. I think it's if we open up the door of knowing that someone has something, then if something goes wrong,
All the liabilities on them at
all
that
the
point.
liability, money. And so to just kind of put your head in the sand and say like, nope, doesn't exist, we don't know it, then, they can not be liable. That's my guess. I don't know.
That's a good guess.
That'd
It
be
makes the
mine.
most sense.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Because then if you
Bureaucracy and
look at a
liability.
lawsuit, like who would have the deepest pockets? It would be the FAA if you're looking to sue someone.
Yeah, I mean, it's hard to sue the government though. It's frustrating to, because there is no real answer to that. I mean, so why do you think, they just went through mental health reform in the last year, right? Which was shocking, but good that they actually did
Yeah.
it. But why do you think they finally took that step? Because for so long they didn't.
I think going back to Captain Emerson, I think we got really lucky that that wasn't a fatal incident. And so we were able as a society to maybe look at it a little bit more objectively without the tragedy with it, and say like, this was preventable. It didn't escalate to a tragedy, but the fact that it got so close could have been prevented. I think in general what's that, like, things are written in blood.
The regs
Well,
are
Yeah.
written in
thankfully,
blood.
this one didn't come to blood, but they were like, let's maybe, change that. And in that case, I'm not speaking as an expert by any means, but with the involvement of, mushrooms, it sounds like he was maybe forced to go through some kind of back channel that maybe he didn't feel like he could go talk to someone or, have equal access to healthcare. I don't know. And I'm not like playing armchair. I haven't watched the documentary or anything, but that was kind of my first thought was, well, what if he did have access? Or what if even he took the mushrooms and then had access to a mental health person that he could call if he had a bad trip or something?
Yeah.
So
And
yeah,
for
that would be
clarification, this is the guy who tried to pull the fire handles in Seattle, right?
correct. Yeah,
Okay, just to make sure for
that
people
landed
that
in
didn't
Portland.
know. Yeah. Yeah, just in case somebody didn't know. So, yeah, I mean, that was definitely a super high profile event. And so I guess the question is, did the committee form after that incident?
Yeah, that
It did,
incident
okay.
really started it. Because I think that incident happened during winter, and then the committee assimilated in summer later. I
Okay.
tried to get on that committee a lot.
Tell us about
Tried
that.
really. Yeah. So when I found out that it was forming, I reached out myself. I was like, "Hi, Kora. I think I have something to offer." No response. I reached out to my state legislators and representatives, and they reached out. I even had a representative from Indiana try to reach out, who was like a family friend, and I got nothing. And through the grapevine, I heard that they were uninterested in anyone that didn't have like a PhD, a PsyD, or an MD. which is a real bummer because you miss out on a lot of people that are like boots on the ground and actually working with people. So that was my experience with it.
Which is, as a former medical professional, that's mind-boggling because the majority of mental health therapists are master's level at most.
Yep.
I mean, I can't think any on a personal level. I don't think I know any, because the stigma in the medical community is if you're a psychiatrist, which are the ones that can write meds, you have to be
Yeah.
an MD. But the problem
Yeah.
is if you go to a psychiatrist, all they want to do is throw meds at you, which is why most
Yep.
people go to psychologists, which a psychologist has to be a PhD, right?
Yeah.
Okay, so yeah, you're looking at a PhD because they can't write meds, and that's the guy you want to talk to because he's going to work you through your problems.
Yeah.
Like Jordan Peterson's he's a PhD. He's a psychologist. He can't write meds, that
Exactly.
kind of thing.
So like many things in aviation, gatekeeping was really
Yeah.
present in this. So yeah, that was really frustrating. I really felt like I'm glad that they came to the conclusions that they did. They're all really
Yeah,
positive, but that was
right.
really discouraging in the moment.
I was going to say, I think one thing the government does, if you look at the way they hire and everything, they're very black and white on what they require.
Yeah.
And that's the same way they do their pay codes too, right? So they have GS whatever, and that's what it is. And I told this story before about when I was in DC, and basically people could size everyone up based upon their GS code for their pay and what they did for a living. And I think that's pretty prevalent just within the whole government side of jobs. Like I could be completely wrong, but it seems like kind of the thing. And I think that kind of correlates to if you don't meet this level, then we are not even going to have the courtesy of responding to you and see ya, which is insane. But
People or, yeah, that I'm glad it worked out. But yeah, that was definitely I think a peek into the inner like machinations of it.
sure.
It's like, all right,
Yeah.
I'm gonna crawl back into my like little underground hole and keep doing what I've been doing. So yeah. And it's
It's one thing that like the powers that be where, when it looks at what they're doing, maybe they can impact an immense amount of people, but on the day to day, you're the one out there dealing with real people and their real problems. And they're kind of, in a different world where they're like thinking about these, big ideas and how they can affect the macro. And it's like, I don't know, it can be very frustrating. I'm not going to get into politics or
They're
government,
process
but
people. They're not doers.
yeah,
yeah.
yeah.
It's all about
And
the
for me,
process.
and it's like, well, that process might not lead to anything material. And the inverse is true for you. Everything is materially produced for you. Like you're having material difference in people's lives, a real impact in that sense. So
Mm-hmm.
I'm not trying to be a super big hater on the FAA or anything. I just think that, these are our representatives. This is our government. And I want us to be presented the best way possible. And I want our pilots to be taken care of the best way possible. And I might sound ignorant of some things. I probably am, but I still think these things are worth saying on a platform because if we can get someone's attention, even one, to reconsider what we're trying to say and the problems that real pilots face, that's a huge success in my book. And I think there's hundreds of thousands of people that would agree with me on that. And one other thing I wanted to bring up too was I think the FAA is going to have a really interesting time with this new generation of aviators coming up because if you look at the people from kind of the last decade and kind of the boomers to Gen X, I think it is. So like the 50-year-olds now, their kind of culture was don't talk about your feelings. Don't, whatever it is, just kind of sweep it under the rug and go about your day. And you're a man, that's what you're supposed to do, or woman, whatever. And I think this is completely different nowadays on what we consider. I'm 20, about to be 27. So, what I consider to be a healthy way to talk about my feelings or to try to be in a better mental state of mind. And I think those things are going to have to change because I think a lot of people my age are not going to put up with the way things are and the platforms that can be changed, I think. So, I don't know. What do you think about that, Scott and Cora?
Yeah, no, I I agree. I'm kind of excited. I was raised kind of by boomers, and then I also come, from Hispanic culture that's also very known for like we don't talk about things.
Yeah.
And so, this whole thing really highlights the people are getting in trouble for following the rules. And the younger generation isn't good about keeping quiet when they feel like there is an
Yeah.
injustice. And then also the younger generation is also a lot more in tune, has more resources for mental health that are, more willing to talk about it. And technology, I'm not sure how technology in the future will impact policy change, but I'm excited. I hope it does. I hope the young generation has like fire in their bellies to like do something with that. But yeah, I'm really excited to see the younger generation just kind of speaking things that were not spoken of before. With that said, they have their own challenges, such as, patience. I've noticed a lot of the younger generation. So we'll see. And maybe that could work out in that they want their change now. And I'd love to see that if they could bring that urgency to Congress or, to policy change. So yeah, I'm excited.
Scott,
Yeah.
what do you think?
Well, I agree with Cora. I think that, the younger generation is very vocal and they were raised to talk about their feelings, unlike their predecessors. And so I'm wondering if that that loud voice of that generation, and by them not staying quiet, is starting to force the change that we're seeing, and with social media as this big platform that brings it out public, right? It's not hidden in the dark alleys anymore, because people just go on social media, even as anonymous, and post it, and it gets out there, and now people are seeing it. And with it used to be that they could suppress certain news stories and things. Can't do that
Yes.
anymore. And so
No.
Doesn't work like that.
yeah, so there's no more hiding all these things, because the reality is all these things have been here forever. But like John was saying, we didn't talk about it before, and it was hidden before, and now it's just in everybody's faces. So we're being forced to deal with it. It's a whole, like, a societal adjustment period. And,
Yeah.
at the speed of government, they're having a real hard time trying to keep up with that because they're so far behind it.
I have a really interesting thing I'm thinking about right now of what do you think the average age of someone working in Oklahoma City is that has actual authority to change these things? I bet.
74.
Okay, so
Okay.
let's
Hang on, John. I'm grokking it as we speak.
just put in perspective this. They are from a different generation with different lines of what they think is correct and wrong. And I don't want to make it too generational, but it really is, to be honest with you. What is that going to turn into when we have 35-year-olds and 40-year-olds, the ones that are the ruling class in terms of making decisions? I think an immense amount of things are going to change, not only in FAA, but the entire government and how they deal with things. And I think that when you get 75-year-olds plus and people who refuse to retire and they continue working, again, that's the boomer generation, just saying. But
Mhm.
anyways, it goes on to say, dude, like, this is not, we don't need your pastime of things. The new generation needs to make those things vocalized, because I don't think those things are going to change until those people in power are out of those roles. And I'm not trying to make it political.
No, you're
I'm
right.
just being completely honest. That is who rules these, top hierarchies of what they consider to be right and wrong. And that's what they grew up with, what was it? Say no to drugs with Ronald Reagan's wife
There.
and all that.
Yeah.
Yeah, so
Mhm.
that was
There,
what they
yep.
grew up on.
Yeah.
So all of that kind of stuff. And until that changes, then I don't think there's going to be any real material change necessarily. I could be completely wrong, but
No, I agree.
that's
And
kind of
that's
where I
kind
see.
of where it's like, oh, when you have to have a PhD, well, what 24-year-old, unless they're like super smart, in which case they're smart enough to not be in the mental health field, that does kind of cut back on, the plug of what are the risk factors of young people, but what are the protective factors of young people? And I feel like when you get really insular, you miss out on those perspectives. And so that was another like frustrating thing was, the rulemaking committee did come out and it was mostly people 40, 50 plus. And I'll say it, mostly like white people. And,
Yeah.
and we know in
Mhm.
aviation that's, starting to change now. So to get the people representing us in whatever it is to look more like the people in the actual group, I think, regardless of what group we're talking about, would be really helpful.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. That makes a lot of sense. So, I mean, we'll see what happens there, but I never really thought about it until now with why they made the rules they did. Well, I think there's a lot of stuff behind that. And like I said before, I'm not bashing them. I'm just frustrated with the process. And I think so many other people are. And hopefully we see some change in that sense.
And I think you bring up something which is another thing I wanted to segue into, which is there are administrative changes being made, but that doesn't translate well into pilots getting the care they need. So I know from that rulemaking committee, some things we're able to say like, okay, you can, it might be, it's not a cancellation, but it's now a deferment. But what you're running into is now that folks have access, they're getting deferred. And a lot of my clients, they get deferred and they haven't heard back before it's like 10 months and they haven't heard anything. And Scott and I were talking is you have to reach out to your state representative or legislator to get your packet through Oklahoma City within any reasonable amount of time under a year. And
Yes.
I recently put out a survey on Instagram. You like as a researcher, I acknowledge Instagram isn't like the end all be all, but I got a few hundred responses and I asked, how long did it take for your correspondence with the FAA? And nearly half of the people said over a year, and about a third of the people said over 2 years. Yeah. So that's again, take it kind of with a grain of salt because it's just Instagram, and
Sure.
it's only a 200 person
But
pool.
that's not an unrealistic
Yeah,
time
yeah,
frame.
exactly.
You're right. When I got hired by the agency as a controller, the only way to get your file pushed through in under 2 years was to get your congressmen and senators to just bombard the FAA offices with phone calls just to get your application moved up. Like this is after you've waited the 6 months from application to testing to even get accepted through the testing program. And so then once you've passed, back then it was the ATSAT, then you had to get your congressmen and senators involved to start pushing. It took almost 8 months to get my flight surgeon to push my paperwork after taking my back. It's the equivalent of a second class medical for the FAA. This is to get hired. It took me over 2 years to get hired at the FAA. And there was already a controller shortage going on at the time. And with pilots, it's just as bad, if not worse, to get
And
your
that doesn't
medical stuff.
factor in cost, especially if your company or your job is like, you can't work unless your medical is up to date. You might
Yep.
not even have access to insurance, depending
Yes.
on if your job offers Cobra or, if your partner has insurance through their job. And so that's another really overlooked thing for pilot mental health is also the debt that most pilots are carrying. I think would make any average person just a little mentally ill,
Well, yeah.
stress.
Well, now what frustrates me is why?
Yeah.
Why does it take so damn long to push a few pieces of
That's
paper
what
off a
my question was
bureaucrat's
going to be.
desk? And they won't give us
Yeah.
an answer. And I bet it's because they don't have an answer, or it's because they're sitting there twiddling their thumbs because that's the only way to maintain their budget and jobs.
Yeah.
Because why does it take so dang long? Even, I'm just saying it like it is. Even,
Yeah,
I mean,
I think you're
I spent a
right.
decade working in medicine, and I had to deal with the insurance companies day in and day out, and I was still able to get stuff pushed through way faster. There's
Yeah.
no excuse for it taking that long for the FAA to push paperwork through. Period. End of story. Especially if we've spent, as a pilot group, tens of thousands of dollars of our own money and time and blood, sweat, and tears and frustration and not being able to work to jump through their hoops only for them to just make us wait. If they're going to
Yep.
make
And
you
then
jump through that many hoops, it should be as soon as you're done. Okay, you've checked the boxes, off it goes. And this is what they can come up with, all kinds of excuses. But it's paper. Well, then figure out how to digitalize it. Figure out how to streamline it, because I've dealt with so many AMEs over the years who were just as frustrated. Like my personal story, I had to have heart surgery to get my medical. So I was medically discharged from the military back in 2009, and I wanted to be a pilot, and I had to go through a senior AME at the time And he said, you have two options. You can either have a special issuance every 6 months for the rest of your career, which can be pulled at any moment, or you can get this heart surgery, wait a year, jump through all these hoops, which the CME protocol for heart is retarded because it has nothing to do with with actual heart related protocols. Any cardiologist would tell you that. But then I had to wait a year. Luckily, that time for my condition's been reduced to 3 months. I just found out, which is a major improvement and a fair one. But a year, then to get the testing, then to go see a very special AME who had direct connections in Oklahoma City to get my paperwork pushed through. If I hadn't saw that guy after getting done, it would take an additional year to get my paperwork pushed through. That's how ridiculous it was. And it cost me tens of thousands of dollars to get this. I mean,
What do
Yeah.
you think their file rooms look like?
oh my goodness. Like,
Do you
Yeah.
think they just have stacks of?
just
They put
you
it
know,
in plant.
and somebody
they don't
knocks
know
a
where to
stack
put it.
over. Oh, that's a year. Oh, you think they're still working on those hole punch cards, machine fed ones?
Yeah.
Matrix
Yeah.
printers. And another thing too, while we were talking, is if you're like in if you're like, a lot can change medically in 8 months to a year, and so
Totally.
trying to be
Yes.
ethical about it and make a
Right.
decision about this person's career, and you're using stale data that's 8
Right.
to 16 months out from it, you're also doing a disservice for the actual thing that you're trying to do.
Yes.
And that also like doesn't sit right is, you're making these people jump through all the hoops, but any medical professional can tell you things can change even in 3 months.
Yes.
And yeah,
Days. I mean,
yeah, ow.
yeah. Right. It's crazy.
What would it take for them to streamline it? Like, is it going to take?
Burn it down. No, I don't know.
Just start
But
from scratch.
seriously though, because we have AI now that can plan my entire life basically.
So I
And
think
we're talking about it doesn't make sense.
Yeah, I
in that
think what
sense
you
in the year
guys were
2025.
referring to earlier with the age group. So the average, that's according to Grok, but it's 45 to 55 is the average bureaucratic age. The current FAA chief surgeon, Susan Northrup, from what I could find online, she's in her late 60s. And she's been she was an Air Force flight surgeon, and then was with NATO, and so she's been one of those career kind of play the
Yeah.
game, work her way up the chain, which is fine. Hey, that's something for everybody. But those kind of people don't have the in the trenches info that the local AMEs would have. They're up in the castle, right? So there's definitely going to be a
Ivory
disconnect.
Tower.
Yeah, exactly. The
Yeah.
ivory tower, right? There's going to be a disconnect in reality between her experience having only been, we called it staff in the military, a staff officer, right? She wasn't down in the trenches. And then now
Yeah.
that she's all the way up there, there's so many layers of separation from her to like a regular AME. Because I doubt a regular AME can pick up the phone and call Susan and be like, hey, I'm having this issue. What can I do?
dude.
No way. He's going to have to call
No way.
5
So
different
hard
people.
to get in touch
Yeah.
with I tried so hard
Did
to
you?
get in touch with her.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. Oh my god, yeah.
You know?
It's like so hard.
Yeah.
And
And
we've all worked with, if you've ever had a sim instructor, you can tell if they've flown the plane versus if they're like,
exactly.
I learned all of it in the
That
office.
is a great
and this is
analogy.
a really big version of that on
Yes.
like a national scale.
That was the perfect
Yeah.
analogy for what I'm trying to say here.
I got you.
You've done this once or twice before.
I know. I might know a thing or two.
Yeah, but that I think that's the big reason is they've been just in these circles. It's in this like yes man circle, right? Where they're all in these
Yeah.
little groups and they don't care what anybody else from the outside has to say. We've done it this way for 100 years and that's how we're going to keep doing it because that's what keeps the government doing government.
Boeing. I'll just throw that in Boeing.
Yeah,
Yeah.
sure, exactly. And so you're seeing this with what Doge has done to other agencies in the government. They've come in, they've said, nope, knocking out all this old nonsense. We're putting in computers and AI, and fixing the websites in a matter of. I remember there was a big thing when Duffy took over. It was something on the DOT or the FAA site or something like that was like totally outdated and wrong. And he was like, how long is it going to take you to fix it? And they're like, oh, at least 6 months. and Elon came and was like, no, and he changed it in like an hour. Like just boom,
That's crazy.
switched it. It was like and so that's a great example of like what we're dealing with when we deal with CAMI, which is the Civil Aviation Medical something. I can't remember the acronym, but that's the office you deal with when you're dealing with the FAA. And so I would love to find out how many people actually work in that office, because
Yeah.
I'm curious. Like, are there 100 people sitting around at desks doing nothing all day? Probably not. It's probably way lower staff than you think it would be. It's probably, a few people that are in charge of pushing all this paperwork through, and sure, 50 years ago when there were a couple thousand pilots in the US, okay, that's but they haven't grown to match, and they haven't technologically advanced to match.
No.
I think what it comes down to is, if you think about all your paperwork going through, they request, this is what you need to get done on the initial thing. Okay. Then it's going to be, I don't know, a week to get there. What happens when it gets processed? It goes to the back of the queue, and then there's probably caseworkers who go through it, and they probably have, their instructions of, this is all the things that need to be hit. If one little thing is off, have to go resend it. I think about how can we optimize that kind of process, and either you have more labor in that sense, opening the paperwork, or you have some kind of way, and the distribution of how they're getting that information to. It's beyond me how you cannot upload medical records and have different, case profiles, of this needs to get done immediately, or these ones are more complex, and they have different people through that process. If you look at the FAA and how they process that kind of stuff, they'd be out of business. They'd be bankrupt in any other business.
Oh, yeah.
And I know that can be said about a lot of the other government agencies, but specifically about this, it doesn't really make sense how we've kind of just accepted a year and a half, 2-year turnaround when you've provided everything they've needed and taken tens of thousands of dollars of tests. And again, I don't want to seem like we're just bashing on the FAA, but we're just being honest. Like, anything else, imagine if you had to go to a business and wait 2 years for a response.
And also the historical damage that has been done.
Right.
I think that's what's really missed, is like the FAA has come out and made these changes, but they've yet to acknowledge the historical harm they've done to pilots and their families.
They never will.
Exactly.
Yeah,
They never will. Yeah.
everyone has someone they know that has had to be grounded, or has like, raise your hand if the FAA has made you cry. Like, it's not a small and insignificant number. And so that's something that, until they recognize, I think they're not going to get the general public trust and buy-in, despite, even if they all of a sudden got 100 people to look over the paperwork, is, yeah, people aren't going to touch the hot stove because, they know 2 or 3 other pilots that touched it and, got grounded, or, had spent thousands of dollars. So yeah, that's something. And I think you're right. I don't think they'll ever, come out and say sorry about that. But that's something I've noticed, with any government institution that has harmed any marginalized group of people, the trust is not just going to flip on.
It won't. Now, I'm really glad you brought that up, because so the FSDO was able to do this. And this started the week I got hired at the week I started at the FAA. My first week at the FAA. So Oklahoma City is where the academy, the Mike Monroney Aeronautical Academy is. And the FSDO building, the FSDO headquarter building, is next to the ATC buildings. And so when we would walk to our classes every day, you had to walk past the FSDO office. And I remember my first week walking past it, and all it was like pissed off, angry guys standing out front chain smoking. Like, no kidding. Like something out of a movie. Like, and the flower beds were all dead. And like, you just walk past and you were like, ooh, I could feel like the hate coming off of that building, right? This was the old mean inspectors, right? Well, that was when Huerta, I think, was the administrator back then. And they said it had gotten so bad where pilots were not even talking to the FAA anymore and all these crashes were happening, all these violations were happening. And so he actually was the administrator who said, we need to change this. So he went in overnight, fired all of FSDO management. It was crazy. And for like the next couple days, there was nobody at that building.
Damn.
And it was really weird. And
That's
then we
crazy.
come back like a week later, and they've hired all new management, and they're doing, we're the kinder, gentler FAA, right? So we're going to start working with pilots, no longer going straight to revocation and violation, and do re-education, you know, and fixing the problem. Work with them to figure out why these things are happening. And so like then like a couple weeks later, the flower beds were all new and people were friendly and stuff. And over the next several years, as I got into professional aviation and got out of the FAA and all that, I noticed the change. It took 5 to 7 years probably for it to be really noticeable. But now dealing with the FAA, if you have to like talk to an inspector or something, it's such a different experience. It's actually pleasant half the time. You know, like if you might have done something you got a phone number for and you have to go through an investigation. We had Vince on, right? And Vince was talking about it in one of the earlier episodes. I had an issue early on in my 135 career where I thought I was going to get violated on something, and I made an honest mistake. We didn't have ASAP, right? So I spoke with the POI at the time. She was so easy to talk to. It was, and she explained to me, she goes, we don't go to revocation like we used to, not even suspension. She's like, it's all about, number one, do you admit you made a mistake? And if you did, okay, we could work with you, you know? And then a lot of times it's just a conversation. Sometimes they might ask you to take some classes to re-educate, or, you know, very rarely does it go to a 709 ride. That's super rare. And so I said, she said, so she was a former regional pilot, and she had been doing it, I think 5 or 10 years as an inspector, somewhere in that time frame. And she said she's only ever had to suspend a guy. One guy, she never even revoked. And I said, well, why'd you have to suspend? And she said, because when we asked him, he said, yeah, I know I did this. I intentionally did it, and I'll do it again. F you guys. And that was the guy they suspended.
That's
they didn't even
reckless.
revoke him.
Oh,
They
yeah.
suspended him, right? And so like that is the newer inspectors we deal with at the FSDOs now. I'm not saying, you know, there's always 10% of everywhere, right? There's always going to be that guy at one of those offices you might run into, but at least if you do deal with that guy, you can go to his supervisor. You can go around him. Like that's the thing pilots need to understand. You can ask for their supervisor. You do not have to deal with this guy if he's being unreasonable, because they work for you. They're government employees. So that's something to remember. Don't let them push you around. But anyways, sidebar. The whole point was that it can change. The FAA did put the work in, and they were able in a few years. And it's like now the majority of pilots, you know, there's always the old school guys who, you know, they're always going to have that attitude of the FAA is out to screw you. I fly with these.
Yeah.
These are the boomers, the real boomers.
Yeah.
Those are the guys I fly with all the time, especially
Denver Flying Club, baby.
Yeah, man, senior base. Senior
You guys
bases
have
have them.
stickers? I want a sticker. No, just kidding.
Yeah,
For your-
that's
yeah.
actually a really good idea.
gosh.
I claim 3%.
Yeah, that's right. We'll send you your cut. But yeah, it's like, look, there's always going to be the older guys who did deal with those rough times, and so no matter what, they will always think that way. But those guys are on their way to retirement real quick, and so this younger generation won't have, hopefully, that experience with the FAA, because it would be great if it was an agency that we worked together with, and you know they had their rules and everybody played by the rules, and as long as you played by the rules, you had no problems, and you were rewarded for playing, or not punished for playing by the rules. Problem with the medical side is, even if you play by the rules, you can do everything perfectly and you're going to get punished, because that's how they do business. So, but this leads into, you know, we're talking about how can they streamline it. You know, EMRs, electronic medical records, are a big thing. I wonder if the FAA is even on one. I doubt it. Last I checked, you still had to fax everything. You couldn't digitally send anything.
You still, from my experience, you have to mail it still.
Mail it,
From
yeah.
what?
That's
Like
crazy.
snail, like USPS support the post office. Yeah.
They don't have a secure digital upload site. Like, am I
And
blowing
if
your
you've ever
mind?
gotten a letter, this is just me being
It's just ridiculous, too.
this is just me being nitpicky, but have you seen the type font? It looks like if you get a letter from the FAA, it literally looks like it was written on like a typewriter from the
No, it's literally
1940s.
been that same font for
Yeah.
forever. Yeah, no, it's
Again, being totally nitpicky and superficial here, but that also doesn't offer the most encouragement that
the
like
IRS
your
is the
work.
same way. Yeah. Yes, but at least the IRS can digitally deliver you your notifications through their portal. They use ID Me. It's like, okay, another agency uses that, FAA. Get on board, man. We should be,
Exactly.
like.
Can I ask you guys a question though?
Yeah.
What do you think if we had someone from Oak City here defending themselves in the agency?
I
Could
would
I
love
meet
it.
What
them?
would
I'm
their
a speech and debate kid from high school. Could I please like come on to this episode?
If one of
Yeah.
them reaches out, Cora, I will gladly invite you,
I
bring
don't
you
think
in.
they're gonna reach out.
I
Yeah, I
doubt
think
it.
we're
I
gonna
doubt
have
it. But
to
hey,
lunch
FAA, we'd love to have you on. Come on,
We'll send you
tell
a
us
gift
the reality.
basket,
Yeah.
a fruit basket. Yeah.
Yeah. But I'm serious though. What do you think they would say being like, again, we're not bashing, we're just telling our frustrations of what we deal with in the industry. And I'm sure those people listening, we're telling the truth. We're not making this a bigger deal than it is.
Yeah.
This is real
We're not
people's lives.
sensationalizing anything.
No,
No,
we're not.
not at
This
all.
is the real process of going through and trying to get a medical to have a right to work and earn a living for your family. We're not doing anything crazy here. So I want to make that very clear to people that we're not trying to come on here and just say these are everything wrong. I also want to give the flip side of being like, okay, well, what do you think that they would tell us saying that, hey, we have made improvements, or
Mhm.
where do you think they would kind of draw from
I
if we're
think
having devil's advocate?
okay, I think there's one of two ways it could go. One, if we have like one of the older people that's like, well, that's just the way it is. I would rather be doing anything else, but Linda's out for lunch, so I have to be on this podcast.
Yeah.
And then I think the other people are, and you see this sometimes with like police culture too, is like you have the folks that go into it to maintain and withhold the culture that's always been. And then you have some folks, younger that are like, I think the system could be done better. And so depending on the reason that person went into the, FAA or whatever, that would have an impact. But I could totally see someone, similar to myself, that's like, let's start from that part and like build up. And then also, with a lot of cuts, they'd probably say to like wait a few years, like hang tight, y'all, and then we'll, I might agree with you, but this is kind of what it is right now. But hopefully we are going to get more of the folks that
Younger blood.
apply and send in an application because they feel like it could be done different. Now, whether the people at the top are like, we want those people on our team, that's, not something I can speak to, but I'm hoping, something be the change you want to see in the world. Someone's encouraged to do that.
I got another interesting perspective too.
Yeah.
Do you think, we only kind of have only the generations alive right now that we can draw off of? I think there's such a big disconnect between that generation and the younger generations now because the internet, the world changed significantly between when they were my age and their age now.
Yes.
And not only culture, but like the actual world of technology, how business is done, everything. And I guess what I wonder is this an insignificant change that has kind of always occurred within government and its people? Or is this something that's kind of unique right now based upon the kind of those factors I mentioned of that technology and just the way the world works? Because obviously there's always going to be young people saying, look at the old people and how they're this way. And then the old people saying, get off my lawn. And,
Yeah.
that's always been around. But I'm saying specifically for something like this, I feel like this is different than generations in the past and having that old versus young mentality because the world has changed so much since then.
I think what this has going for it, and this might be an unpopular opinion, is the people who it's impacting now are the people in society with power. Like, I don't know if, like Indian like if they had the same wants, I don't know if they would have the same platform as we are seeing with pilots and the mental health movement is, at the end of the day, a lot of, folks are kind of more privileged, and you see that in it being, mostly a male dominated thing. And I'm not saying like men don't experience lack of privilege in their world, but I think it is changing at maybe a different pace than we've seen historically, because the people who are marginalized are not generally people who are marginalized in the rest of society. So
Mm-hmm.
I think that might have a cultural play to it, or like a moment where the people who are upset might have more resources as well, whether it be technology or money. I think that might have a difference as well of like getting it out there. I think there's like the pilot mental health campaign that has like really good like infographics and like has really used technology to get their message across. But yeah, I think at the pace it's going, I think it's because the people who it's impacting have a little bit more resources than other marginalized groups, historically speaking.
No, that makes sense.
Yeah.
Scott,
That's
you have
a
any
guess,
opinion
though.
on
I
that?
don't know. That's totally just a guess. Yeah.
No,
I
I
don't
think
know.
you're right. It's the pendulum swung the other way, and now it's swinging back, and I think you got a good point there, Cora, on that.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I did not think about it before I said it, so hopefully it's still good.
You guys wanted to talk about ADHD. Let's
Yeah,
transition into
Cora,
that.
could you walk us through kind of this? And Scott, would you mind pulling it up for the people watching
Mm-hmm.
visually? Could we talk about ADHD and kind of what your stance is on, not stance, but like what your opinions are on
Yeah.
kind of how that evolution has came to be, and really anything about the subject? Because I know there's probably hundreds of thousands of people that have probably been deferred to
Yeah.
that subject.
Yeah. So I'm actually glad, in terms of talking about how I got into the aviation mental health, or like what made me passionate about it, was actually in part, and keep in mind this was like 5 years ago, but the stipulation on ADHD, which up until 6 months ago it was like a no-go, like full stop. If you've ever had a diagnosis, then that was like you were disqualified. And I'm 30, so I grew up in the 90s where like everyone was kind of like, you have ADHD, you have ADHD, before we
Yeah.
kind of understood maybe autism or some of other things that could explain behaviors. And so, one, I was like, well, that's really unfair, because a lot of people I know that got diagnosed as like kids. And then two, knowing now what I know about ADHD as a mental health professional, I would die on the hill that an ADHD pilot might have certain strengths that a neurotypical pilot wouldn't have. And that ability to take in, that hyperactivity really allows pilots with ADHD to take in a bunch of sensory inputs and then make really quick decisions based on that in some ways that neurotypical people can't. And so that kind of stood out to me, looking at it with the background of a mental health professional and knowing what ADHD is, textbook wise, is that just didn't seem to match up. I mean, it's kind of funny. I have colleagues that, work with me, and we always joke like, we'll take the ADHD pilot, please. Like, we could guarantee that. That would be awesome. And I think a lot more pilots have it than report, obviously, because if they reported, then that would be a thing. But I think there are traits associated with ADHD that would make someone a better pilot.
Interesting.
Yeah.
And Scott, did you have it pulled up so we can kind of go through it?
Yeah, I'll use this as an opportunity to kind of give a quick overview of something I've been wanting to show on the podcast for a while. So in my medical experiences with the FAA over the years and with my medical background, I knew there had to be a way to kind of to find out what AMEs had to go by. And so here is the Guide for Aviation Medical Examiners, the AMEs guide. It's accessible by anybody, and it is the cheat sheet essentially to what to expect when you go into your AME for an exam or questions. It's a searchable document now, and it's broken down in different sections. You've got your general information, and then you have your air medical decision considerations, and this is the important spot which talks about medical dispositions, disease protocols, pharmaceuticals, special issuances. And this is where it tells you what you can take, what you can't take. if you're diagnosed with certain things, what are allowed, not allowed, your pharmaceuticals, drugs, and then it has worksheets on how to work through all this stuff. So this demystifies the whole thing. So for example, this is the general AMU FA thing. You can go into the search bar here and we'll just pull up ADHD. And this is going to give you everything. The search tool is actually pretty decent on this. So there's different tracks for ADHD, both the fast track and the standard track. This pathway chart, which I found was actually pretty good. So this talks about, and these all relate to having been diagnosed and taking meds for ADHD and treatment. So this one's a pretty good flow chart, actually. So, important here prior to scheduling, you got to provide all documents on the document checklist, which is another PDF, to the psychologist and neurophysical psychologist before the appointment. There's a bunch of stuff they got to fill out. And then it's a flow chart, right? So any treatment, use of ADHD meds or symptoms in the past 4 years, or any history of psychiatric diagnosis or treatment ever. There's a yes or no. If not, you can go down the fast track. If previously, then you go down the standard track. And standard track takes you through HIMSS. And so HIMSS is a very, very, very expensive and drawn out process. For those of you who have to go down the standard track, just understand it's going to be a commitment and some time and a lot of money. And there's very limited number of AMEs who are even HIMSS certified, because it is such a difficult process to go through. A lot of them don't even get certified on that. And then it has to go through the FAA for review, and it'll be a special issuance if you get approved. The fast track
Scott,
side
I have a
of
quick
it.
question.
Yeah, go ahead, man.
So it's saying that the initial block is any treatment, use of ADHD medication or symptoms in the last 4 years. Okay. And then it says, or any history of psychiatric diagnosis or treatment ever.
Mm-hmm.
Well, who the hell qualifies for no? Do you know what I mean? Isn't like if you ever been diagnosed with ADHD, then you're automatically in the yes into a standard?
Yeah, that's a good question. Well, yeah, if you've had it, yeah, you fall under standard.
Yeah.
Okay, so
Yeah.
who's in the fast track then? I know that we're not professionals here. I'm just like, that makes no sense.
Yeah, that's a good question.
Well, remember before we got on last while, I was like, wait, that kind of contradicts it. And so, yeah, I don't know.
Yeah, that's a great question.
There has to be something that.
Well, let's look up the fast track.
clarifies
Here's
it.
the
Anyways.
fast track summary. Let's talk it out. So please take this summary to a doctoral level, PhD or PsyD, psychologist or neurophysical psychologist with training and experience in the evaluation of ADHD, preferably someone with additional subspecialty training in aviation specific topics. Good luck finding that specialist. There's probably like one. The doc should enter the requested information below. All right. So they've got to fill this stuff out, supporting documents. If you're the psychologist or neuropsychologist, all right, does the applicant currently have any symptoms? Yes or no, per DSM. Has there been
DSM though?
Yeah, exactly.
They don't say
and they don't
which
specify
one.
which DSM, because it could dramatically change. Yes or no. Has there been instability in academic, occupational, or social functioning in the past 4 years? Has the individual taken ADHD meds anytime for any reason in the last 4 years? Does the individual have any other issues, psychiatric issues? Anxiety, depression, or related medications which meet fast track criteria, or concussion without sequelae are not included in this category. So that's your answer, John. So because they have the FAA last year put in the mental health reform, which gives the anxiety, depression, or related condition exemption, which allows you to see a therapist now and get diagnosed with anxiety or depression and still maintain your medical. So that's the fast track option. So it's an exemption on it. So those are the only people that are going to meet that category for that branch. And then go ahead.
They're the only ones that can meet the fast track if they have anxiety and depression along with trying to apply for, like, do you see where I'm trying to get hung up on? Could you explain that one more time?
Right. So you're asking which people meet this no for fast track. And
Yeah.
so I'm guessing this is new symptoms is what they're referring to. not historical symptoms. If you just developed them in your self-reporting and you don't have a history.
Well, how do you develop? You can't develop ADHD.
I know, man.
That's not a
I know.
thing. Okay.
And this is
Okay.
why this is the process people, because
Yep.
you're right.
Yep.
From a
I made a
medical
meme
standpoint.
about
Yeah, because from a medical standpoint, this makes absolutely no sense. Because ADHD isn't something people just develop in their adulthood, especially. This is something that you're born with. Maybe not born with, but develop at a young age, you know. I don't know what the exact criteria are. I'm not a specialist in neurophysical psychology. But from my 10 years of medical experience, this isn't something that just pops up like that. So you're right, John. You're onto something. And this has to do with the process people not looking at, you know, they were given a task and they're like, okay, how do we fit in this box of doing something that satisfies people? And this is what they came up with. And it's because, like Kora said, they stayed within their circle of people, of their PhDs and MDs only, and didn't consult therapists in the trenches dealing with these things on a daily basis. That's my outside perspective. I could be totally wrong. FAA, please come on and correct us if we're wrong. We would love it. And
I feel
everybody
like we
listening
have to
would
be
love it.
wrong.
I will send any FAA representative an edible arrangement. This is my promise. I am live. No, it's not, but I will guarantee an edible arrangement for any FAA employee that wants to come and talk to me. You heard it
There you
here
go,
first.
FAA. Come on in. There's probably some rule that says they can't do that because that's a bribe or something like that.
I'm sure.
Yeah.
Okay, well, I will make them the nicest.
But your
hand-
senators and congressmen can take bribes, so that's who you should be reaching out to.
Ayo. I did, and the FAA still ignored them. So.
No, jeez. You didn't give them a big enough bribe. You got to up that from an edible arrangement to whatever the next step above it is.
I don't know what's above an edible
Take them to
arrangement.
Ringside Cafe in Portland and buy them a nice dinner.
Yep, exactly. Maybe that's halibut steak dinner.
There
Yeah,
you go. That's how you do it. But yeah, I mean, this is a good topic. You know, it's a good way to highlight, you know, how difficult it can be to even navigate this stuff, which is, you know, it can get so convoluted even for AMEs. They have access to all this stuff, and it takes them learning to speak this language just to be able to navigate the guide. And then they end up having to call Oak City anyways for clarification. And even for them, it takes probably days and weeks to get responses. So this is the problem, is why is there not, I mean, there might be, I might be wrong, but there should, if there isn't, there should be a line that any AME at any time can pick up, business hours, pick up the phone and call and get somebody on the phone who's able to get them an answer that day.
yeah. Like
You know.
like how like clinics have like a nurse advice line or
Yeah.
like. But you know what? How do I do this right? You know, the first time, especially because aviation out everywhere is like you have to do it right, and so the last thing you want is for people to get these complicit attitudes that then seep into the flight deck or whatever, and so it's just a real bummer when people are getting punished for following the rules.
Exactly. And that's what we're highlighting today is you follow the rules and you still get screwed. And it's been what's the word I'm looking for? It's not toxic, but it's just been an invasive.
Volatile? Is
No.
that the word?
No, not volatile. No, I think I'm more like trying to say like it's been an invasive mindset in the agency for so long. And there's been it doesn't seem like there's been
Pushback.
anybody. Yeah, exactly. It doesn't seem like there's anybody who's come into a position of power who's like, you know what? We need to make this better for the people who keep us in business. And it's the pilots that keep them in business. And so make the customer service experience better for the pilots because we are the customers. We're the ones. Without us, they don't have jobs. There's nobody to regulate this stuff on. And the old mindset of let's make it convoluted so that it slows the whole process down. Well, that's not the way to do this. That's a real old government mindset that's not effective because you're just ruining people's lives. And they really don't care. I really think they don't care. Clarification, like John was trying to make earlier. These are the conversations we have when the flight deck door is closed. That's the kind of podcast we're trying to hold. These are literally the conversations we have on the flight decks about this kind of stuff. So the general public can see what we think and what we talk about. That's the whole point of this podcast. It's,
Oh,
you know,
cute.
yeah, autopilot comes on, headsets come off and we have the talk, right? Like, yeah.
Oh!
Ah! It all makes sense now.
Yeah,
That's funny.
exactly. Yeah.
That's the exact conversation we had when we came up with the name too.
Yeah. Coming up with names is fun. It definitely is. And, that circles back to why you want people in charge of this to be the folks in the flight deck, not just like in office workers that are career office workers have their place. And I'm not dissing it, but when you're making decisions for an environment that is nothing like an office, I think that's where that like disconnect is, folks that.
And I think there should be diversity in thought too.
Yeah.
That's like the biggest thing, kind of what you're highlighting is I have no problem with people from PhD or MD, whatever level it's going to take for the government, but also including everyone else, because, the more you can include those different diversity of thought, the better and more kind of holistic view you're going to create versus from the top down. And what I think we've kind of driven home that point is being able to see these big fundamental issues within our industry from a more holistic view and not from the 1960s. This is how it's always been done. And I think that's kind of what we've been driving home for the last 40 minutes is that needs to change materially. I don't know where it's going to go, and we'll see if it changes the next, in our career, and, fingers crossed, but I know that we're doing everything we can to push people into having those conversations with, if they need to, and go seek help, because you need to take care of your mental health first. That's 100% full stop.
Yeah,
Yeah.
you definitely don't want to avoid it because too many pilots avoid seeing docs because of the fear of exactly what we're talking about. And
And it can kill people, man. That's
Literally.
the thing is like Scott tells on the podcast all the time, this is life and death stuff. We don't just go and play make pretend on flying, 100 or 250,000 pound jets filled with 40,000 pounds of gas and 240 people in the back. Now, these are real life consequences. If someone's depressed and these things happen and you lose focus for a split second on a really gusty windy landing and you think you're okay, there's real life consequences of this stuff. And that's what makes me really frustrated is that you literally can have people die based upon these rules and regulations that the FAA is setting out to be. And so I just wish that we could change that.
And it's preventable too. Like a lot of people, when they first start thinking they want to see a therapist, is usually not when things are really bad, but you push it off and you push it off. And then, that split second in the flight deck can turn into 10 seconds. And then that, has a much larger margin of error. So yeah.
And it leads you to alcoholism and drugs and like anywhere you can kind of go out of reality instead of dealing with the problems at hand. And you're restricting these people from dealing with the real problems that they're facing. That's another thing. What would they tell pilots that are struggling with these things? Hey, just ground yourself. Yes. And if you ever want to come back, just deal with it yourself.
Hims it out. Yes. Yeah, literally. Yeah.
That's their answer.
It's,
and to play devil's advocate.
It's not a realistic.
It's not realistic, but to play devil's advocate, that's all they know.
Yeah.
Because that's all the agency has ever known. And it gets into a liability like we talked about earlier.
Yeah.
And
I understand the liability. I really do.
Well, and I was thinking about this while we were talking, like that might be another reason why they have avoided going EMR is the liability.
Yeah.
Because
can you explain what EMR is?
So yeah, electronic medical records programs are it's digital. So back in the day, you used to go into a doctor's office or a hospital and there were all these paper charts lined up and file cabinets and all these things with patient information and medical information in. Well, at some point they said, we got to digitize this. And there were all these requirements on, the security and confidentiality and all that stuff. So this is where the EMR programs came in and they created these digital patient chart systems that are also securely stored and have to be securely accessed. And so,
Like my chart, is that kind of what you're
yeah,
talking about?
my
Like
chart,
chart? Yeah.
Epic is the big one that all the hospitals
Yeah.
use now in the big doctor's office. There's several of them out there. We used DocuChart or
Chronos, I
something.
think, is
Yep,
one.
that's one. I can't remember the one I used to use when I ran my clinic, but anywho, so the FAA would have to transition to one of those. And then so the transition process is going to take a long time once they finally go about doing that, which they'll have to at some point. No, but then there's something called HIPAA, the Health Information Portability and Accountability Act. And that's what protects your patient information and limits access, limits who can access it. And so a lot of people are worried, especially pilots, anytime they go to a doctor that the FAA is going to be able to just go in there and access your information. That's super illegal, super duper illegal because of HIPAA. In fact, you should hope they do that because you will have such a big lawsuit. You will buy the airline you work for or whatever airplane you ever wanted to own, and you would be set for life. I'm just trying to make a point that your patient information is federally protected. Now, there have been breaches, like during the whole COVID crisis, there was huge breaches, right? Those companies are going to be majorly liable to those patients if and when they choose to sue for that. In our industry, because, if you're working professionally in aviation, the amount of money you have potential to make over your career, massive lawsuit. Doesn't solve the problem when it happens, but there is financial liability and protection for you. So this could be a big factor as to why the FAA has been so hesitant to do it, because they would have to pick an EMR, and with government bidding, good luck. Oh my goodness, it'd be a nightmare. The VA's program is a disaster. Their medical charting program. So like it'd be the same kind of problem. Then the liability it opens them up to. So just keeping it all on paper in-house has probably been their hedging on that, but it's in the modern society, it just doesn't work anymore. So they're going to have to accept the risk at some point. I think that's my perspective with my medical experiences to maybe why they haven't gone down that way.
Also, lack of accountability might be another one because any
Mhm.
electronic thing you can check in real time to see, like even DoorDash, you can see, what phase your noodles are in,
Yeah,
or
so you could look and
whatever.
see whose desk is on at this time. Yeah, they
Yeah,
don't want
like
that.
yep, exactly.
That's actually a
Preparing
And
your
good
a
point.
personal
order.
phone number to them.
Yeah, review.
Yeah.
You remember Domino's was the first to do it with
Yeah,
the
where you could
pizza?
follow the tracker. That thing was awesome. I remember when
Yeah, really.
yeah,
It was the pioneer of the industry
George is
for
preparing your order. Your order's in the oven.
the
Steve's on the
assurance
way.
always take the longest. I'm like, what does that even mean?
Yeah, but you're right
So
though. Like it would. The thing is, from like talking about wanting to instill trust, that would demystify everything, which is probably why you said they don't want to do it. But it would be a big trust instiller because then you'd be able to see where in the process your stuff is, not having to make a phone call and sit on hold for God knows how long, or send an email that who knows when you'll ever get a response to. You'd
exactly.
be able
There's
to
no
see it.
accountability. Yeah.
Like, this is going back to when I was trying to get my medical pushed for when I got hired at the FAA. It was like there was one lady I could call at the regional office, and her regional flight surgeon, I could never talk to the guy. No way, not going to happen. She's a screener, right? And I remember my paperwork got pushed through. Oh, it's on his desk. He's got a bunch of people ahead of you. And then 2 weeks later, I call back. Yeah, hun, it's still on his desk. Couple more people ahead of you. Okay, 2 more weeks, I call back. Oh, he just went on vacation. He's gone for a month. What? He's gone
Yeah.
for a month. Yeah. So then he gets back and now everything else is piled up and I'm in the pile somewhere. And it was just like calling daily. That's ridiculous. Like,
Yeah.
really? Like, this is ridiculous. So you're right.
Hey, that's bad for mental health. Some might say that.
Well, it's frustrating and stressful. And as it is, our jobs are stressful enough. And if you work in the airline world, especially, this summer's been super stressful. Your business has got to be through the roof. Like, good for you. It's inversely good. And then having to deal with your family issues, and kids and, anything else going on in your personal life, and then dealing with that on top of it. It can easily become overwhelming for even some of the most mentally fortified people. And so that's the big thing, seems like we've highlighted today for sure, is how it can be the process alone can be mentally challenging.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's
Yep.
kind of what I really like working with pilots is like you guys have had just to learn to fly planes. You guys have a very specific set of skills and navigating adversities. And so that's what I always tell clients is like, I'm not trying to get rid of the parts of you that have served you, but how do we just tune them up to like now serve the phase of life that you're in? Or,
Mm.
changing that pilot mindset to now I'm a dad to this newborn that's squishy and like not an airplane. You know what I mean? So yeah, definitely.
John.
It's true. It's hard to turn off your problem solving hat
Yeah.
in a marriage when women and men are a little bit different in how they act with their feelings.
Yeah.
I'll just leave it at that.
Yeah.
So what
Yeah,
I've
that'd be a
realized,
fun episode. I've done a lot of training of like working with different genders. So if you want to
yeah,
ever open that, it is a really fun topic. Not in like a
100%.
disparaging way of like these are better than
No, it's true.
others, but how do the same mental health conditions show themselves
Yeah.
differently in men and women? So
Yeah.
yeah.
Because for me, for us, we're all about kind of just finishing the mission and really mission oriented and doing something. And when your wife is telling you, hey, this happened to me today. And I'm like, well, there's 3 different explanations, and here's the answer on how to fix it. She's like, dummy, I don't care how to fix it. I just want you to listen to me. So I know a lot of men and women on the other side, just depending on who you are and emotional levels, everyone's a little bit different, but it's hard to take off that kind of hat that you wear at work when you come home and you're not dealing with another coworker or life and death kind of stuff in that sense.
exactly. Yeah.
So 100%.
So yeah, anything else on y'all's mind as I like to end all my meetings? Anything else on your mind? If you're my client, I ask that.
John.
I got nothing, Scott. I mean, I
No?
think we covered a lot. I did a lot of boomer bashing, and again, I don't mean to do that. Here's the thing, man. My grandparents are boomers and all. I love them. It's nothing to do with individuals, and I don't want you, if you're 65 plus years old, listen to this. Like, it's nothing against you. It's more of a cultural issue of people of power not wanting to give up that power. And if I look at colleges, who made colleges $100,000, it's that generation who went to school for 5,000. So it's all these different kind of things that I'm really frustrated because I'm dealing with in my life, and I don't want to paint it with a big broad brush,
Yeah.
but I don't know how else to articulate it. I mean, and that's why it's a funny thing for me to say this stuff, but this is the life we're living. And, the people that have been in charge for the last 25 years have been that generation. And it's the first time that we have ever had the younger generation be worse off than the older generation.
Yeah.
Mm.
That
Yeah,
says
yeah,
something.
it is. Yeah.
It's a
So,
very good
Not
point.
just aviation, like
yeah,
yeah.
outside of aviation. And that's where my frustration lies. And it's like, well, it's too late now in that sense, but how can we look forward and do something about that? And I I don't know. I don't want people to think I'm like some bitter guy about that stuff, and when I'm really not. It's frustrating to look at it from my perspective. But when it comes to aviation therapy and along with medical stuff, I think we hit a lot of different key problems that people have. And one thing I want to end on is I hope you guys can DM Cora on her Instagram or her website, and we'll give you a second to plug that. But reach out. Like, your mental health is number one thing you need to be taking care of, no matter what. And if you got to talk to someone, call Elpa and say, hey, I need a couple of days off, and go seek some help. Because at the end of the day, your career is on the line every time you sign in for fit for duty. So that's what I want to leave you with, is really think about when you're fit for duty. Are you really? And you might have a talk with a chief pilot if you have to say, you know what, I'm not. And man, I don't know. That would be a really hard thing to do. But at the end of the day, you got to look at that from a very holistic view and make the right decision for not only you, but your passengers and the people on the ground that you're flying over. So that's my point of view. And I want to end with that.
Nice.
Awesome.
Love it.
Awesome. Cora, what would you like to wrap up with? And then I'll give the final wrap up.
Yeah. If you ever have questions, if you want our aviation.therapist, real original, put a lot of time into that name. I'm here to answer any questions. And if I can't, hopefully I can lead you in the right direction. And yeah, call me, beat me. I've had the same number since 7th grade if you have any questions. So, and thank you guys for having me and not hesitating and having these conversations that until the people, doing it start speaking up and saying this isn't okay, and then the people above listen, we're not going to see change. So I just wanted to say, like, thanks for taking an episode to talk about it. I really appreciate it.
Yeah.
Awesome.
We really appreciate you coming on. One thing we did not talk about today, this is available to controllers and most airline carriers, is a program called AMAS. So Aviation Medicine Advisory Service. It's through ALPA, and then NATCA has it through the FAA. It's a very confidential program you can call, and these are all retired AMEs, I believe, who now work for this agency, and they are this company, and it's super confidential, and they will walk you through. If you have an issue, you can disclose it to them. They're not allowed to talk to the FAA about it, and they will basically tell you all the steps you need to take to get through that program. Basically, they demystify the whole process for you. And to my understanding, if you're ALPA or FAA, it's free. It's already paid for as part of your dues. So it's a really great program that at least you should all be aware of. The other thing, it sounds like we bashed a lot on the FAA today, and it's not designed to be a bashing. It's raw, pure emotion. These are the things that a lot of pilots deal with. It's not that we're trying to hate on the FAA. It's no, these are the frustrations and realities that we have to deal with in our livelihood. And the reason it is so passionate is because it does affect our livelihood as professional aviators who make a living on this. One wrong step with Cami and you're out of a job, and you are out of income for you and your family, and paying your mortgage and putting food on the table, and it's a big, big deal. And that's why we get so heated on this topic. It's not to bash on the FAA. It's to highlight that, hey, the system's broken, especially in the medical process, and it needs reform, and not just talking about it through some study group. It needs active change yesterday, not now, yesterday, and whatever that's going to take. And if that's someone coming in with a sledgehammer and breaking down the walls and starting over there, like, not literally, we're not advocating that by any means, disclaimer, but
disclaimer,
we are clarifying that right now. Do not do that. But just from a bureaucratic standpoint, from a process standpoint, going in there and starting it fresh, if that's what it takes to get it to where it's not, a year to get your paperwork pushed. It's days at most. The reality is, if you've already done all the footwork, checked all the boxes, jumped through all the hoops, it should be an instantaneous approval. And you shouldn't have to submit it and wait for that to work through someone's paperwork. The FAA should be trusting the providers that it told you to go deal with to check their boxes and jump through their hoops. So I will get off my soapbox there. We appreciate you coming on, Kora. Thank you so much. We'll have to do this again. I'm sure there'll be some other topic coming up. We could do. She plugged all our socials. You can get on there. We're on Instagram, Facebook, or not Facebook. Jeez, that's old. MySpace, Instagram.
Any AIM account holders here?
Tom. We're on Instagram, YouTube, Spotify, Apple Podcasts. We have an X account. So thanks again, everybody, for listening. It's been another great episode of the Autopilot On Podcast, and we'll catch y'all on the next one.